They erased my name from Monday's agenda and thought they'd erased my value too. Extra. The CEO's son said it about me like I was a paperclip. I didn't argue. I opened the contract instead. 6 clicks. Not revenge born of rage, but legal procedure they'd signed while sleeping on the word license. 4 p.m. Investor screens froze in unison. The CRM shifted every deal to unqualified for deployment. 128 million in pipeline became 0, no data deleted. Just permissions withdrawn. The golden boy stood before his countdown timer, still smiling his leadership by meme smile, until silence was the only sound left. My name is Leah Archer, and I used to matter at PrairieGate Systems until the Monday I didn't. The notification came at 7:43 a.m., buried between a Slack alert about expired SSL certificates and someone's plea for decent coffee in the break room. FYI, updated attendee list for ops call. My name had vanished from the roster like a typo someone finally corrected. 6 years of never missing a Monday morning strategy session, and now I was apparently optional. I refreshed the calendar invite 3 times, still gone. Technical difficulties, Marcus from infrastructure asked, peering over my monitor. He'd seen it too. Something like that, I said, already knowing this wasn't a glitch. The New World Order had arrived 3 months ago in Italian leather shoes and a Tesla key fob. Graham Whitford, our latest CEO, came from the kind of startup that confused PowerPoint animations with innovation. His first all-hands featured 47 slides about velocity mindset and exactly 0 slides about our actual product. But the board loved him, or loved his promise to triple valuation in 18 months. Graham brought his son Ty as head of growth, though what Ty grew was mainly his collection of branded hoodies and his habit of ending every sentence with "at scale." 29 years old, Wharton MBA still warm from the printer, and he'd already redesigned our CRM color scheme twice because sage green conveys trust better than teal. I watched him now through the glass partition, holding court in conference room C, arms spread wide, projecting something onto the wall that looked like a Jackson Pollock painting had mated with a Gantt chart. The junior developers nodded along, desperate to seem engaged while probably calculating how many months until their stock options vested. Machine learning integration across all touchpoints. Ty's voice carried through the supposedly soundproof glass. We're not just disrupting, we're pre-disrupting. Colin Voss, our CFO, sat at the table's head, thumb scrolling through his phone with the practiced indifference of someone whose loyalty had already been purchased. He'd survived 4 CEO changes by becoming whatever each one needed: cheerleader, executioner, or in this case, enabler of corporate nepotism. The smell of burnt coffee and anxiety permeated our open floor plan. Someone had hung a banner reading "Innovate or Evaporate" above the engineering pods. Below it, my team worked on keeping our orchestration framework from actually evaporating the unglamorous work of making sure tokens validated, APIs responded, and trial accounts converted to paying customers. Leah, Ty's voice behind me had that particular tone friendly like a landlord before eviction. Got a minute? He didn't wait for an answer, already walking toward his corner office, the one with the living wall and meditation corner he'd installed on his second day. I've been looking at our org structure, he said, settling into his ergonomic chair that cost more than most people's rent. And I keep seeing these redundancies. Redundancies, I repeated. Legacy positions, people doing work that should be automated by now. He gestured at his monitor showing our system architecture, or his interpretation of it, which looked like someone had tried to explain AWS through interpretive dance. Like this whole orchestration layer, isn't that just extra? There it was. The orchestration layer handles 27,000 transactions per minute, I said. It's the difference between having a business and having a very expensive screensaver. He laughed that particular laugh of someone who'd never debugged production at 3 a.m. But couldn't AI just handle that? AI could certainly try, I said. Right after it learns to handle authentication tokens that expire every 12 minutes, navigate 14 different vendor APIs with conflicting standards, and maintain PCI compliance while doing it. See, that's exactly the kind of fixed mindset we need to evolve past. He spun his chair toward the window overlooking the parking lot, where his wrapped Lamborghini sat like a neon warning sign. My dad and I, we're building something revolutionary here. Some people will be part of that revolution. Others would be erased from Monday morning calls. I understand, I said, standing. Great. I knew you would. He was already looking at his phone. Oh, and Leah? The leadership team is doing a strategic retreat at Timber Lake this weekend. Obviously, that's more for core decision makers. But we'll need someone to stay back and monitor systems. Core decision makers, the ones who confused Kubernetes with a Greek philosopher but made choices about infrastructure anyway. I returned to my desk and opened the folder I'd labeled Receipts 3 years ago. When I'd learned that documentation wasn't just about code, it was about survival. Every email, every sign-off, every rushed decision they'd made while I kept the lights on. Especially the contract renewal from 2022. The one they'd signed without reading because Leah handles all that technical stuff. They'd forgotten that sometimes the extra pieces are the ones holding everything together. The Timber Lake Executive Center squatted on 40 acres of manufactured wilderness, complete with a Zen garden that looked like someone had Googled Japanese aesthetics and stopped at the first image. I wasn't supposed to be there that Saturday, but Marcus had messaged about a critical hardware failure in the server room, a lie I'd asked him to tell while I delivered the replacement cooling unit myself. I parked behind the maintenance building at 2:30 p.m., far from the Tesla congregation near the main entrance. The October air bit sharp, carrying the sound of forced laughter from the lakeside pavilion where Prairie Gate's core decision-makers were presumably revolutionizing something. The replacement unit took 5 minutes to install. The conversation I overheard while returning to my car took 5 seconds to change everything. They stood on the deck overlooking the lake. Ty, Graham, and Colin, drinks in hand, ties loosened, guards down. I'd stopped behind a cluster of decorative pines when I heard my name. Archer's the perfect cut, Ty was saying. She's expensive, she's rigid, and honestly, she's just overhead at this point. The orchestration work, Graham asked, ice clinking in his glass. We'll distribute it to the dev team. They're hungry. They'll figure it out. That whole compliance framework she built, it's just forms and checkboxes. Any junior engineer could maintain it. Colin laughed a wet, uncertain sound. She did negotiate that weird contract renewal last time. Something about intellectual property. Every employee thinks their code is special, Ty said. Trust me, I've seen her work. It's clean. I'll give her that. But it's not exactly revolutionary. She's like those old IBM guys who thought COBOL would last forever. When? Graham asked. Monday. HR already has the package ready. We'll position it as a strategic realignment. She's professional. She won't make a scene. Good. I want her gone before the investor showcase next week. Can't have her long face dragging down the energy when we're selling the future. The cold I felt had nothing to do with October. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, watching the lake reflect the afternoon sun like scattered code across dark water. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. The anger, when it came, arrived not as heat, but as crystalline focus, the kind I'd felt when debugging critical failures, when everything was failing and only logic could save us. They thought I was overhead, a checkbox, a long face. I drove home to my condo in Oakmere's Tech District, the one I'd bought with the equity from my first startup, the one that had failed because I'd trusted the wrong people with the business side while I built the product. History, it seemed, had a sense of humor. My home office occupied the entire second bedroom, 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle, the server rack humming its familiar bass line in the corner. I made coffee, proper coffee, not the burnt offerings from the Prairie Gate kitchen, and opened the folder I'd been avoiding. Receipts? 6 years of documents flowered across my screen. Emails where Graham approved purchases he didn't understand. Slack messages where Ty authorized deployments he couldn't explain. Colin's panicked texts during the last audit when only my framework had kept us compliant. But the crown jewel sat in a subfolder labeled 2022 Renewal. The Northwind Ledger LLC agreement, my personal consulting company, established years before Prairiegate, through which I'd licensed the orchestration framework when they'd begged me to implement it. They'd wanted to move fast, hadn't wanted to wait for legal to draft a proper work-for-hire agreement. "We trust you, Leah," Graham had said. "Just get it running." I had, under a license that included Clause 4C, the continuity lock. The language was beautiful in its simplicity. In the event of termination without standard transition procedures, minimum 90 days notice and knowledge transfer, all licensed systems will revert to dormant compliance mode, pending license holder approval. They'd signed it, all three of them, probably while discussing their revolutionary vision over aged whiskey. I pulled up the vendor portal, my vendor portal, the one that managed the license tokens for the orchestration framework. Everything looked normal. 6 key scopes glowing green: deal create, trial provision, quote sign, billing authorize, sandbox seed, SLA start, the nervous system of their entire sales pipeline, beating steadily, invisibly, reliably. Overhead. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Oakmere spread out below, its tech corridor glittering with the promise of disruption and innovation and all the other words they'd printed on banners. Somewhere in that maze of glass and ambition, other Leahs were probably working late, debugging the future while someone else took credit for the revolution. My phone buzzed. Marcus again. "They're coming back early. Ty wants to review Q4 projections tomorrow. On a Sunday. Guy seriously needs a hobby." I typed back, "Thanks for the heads up." Then I added, "Take Monday off. Trust me." "Everything okay?" "It will be." I made another cup of coffee and reopened my laptop. Not to the vendor portal, not yet. Instead, I opened our production codebase and located the orchestration layer, the beating heart I'd built with my own hands. There was one more thing to do, one small pull request to submit while I still had access. Nothing malicious, nothing that would harm the system. Just a simple validation check that would honor the contract they'd forgotten they'd signed. The meditation app on my phone suggested it was time for evening mindfulness. I let it play, counting breaths while I typed, calm as a lake before the stone drops. They wanted a revolution. I'd give them exactly what they'd asked for. Sunday morning arrived gray and proper, the kind of weather that made debugging feel like destiny. I sat at my home office at 6 a.m., 3 monitors painting my face in blue light, mapping the kingdom I'd built at Prairiegate. The orchestration framework wasn't just code. It was a living organism with 1,000 moving parts. Every API call, every token refresh, every handshake between services flowed through the pathways I'd designed, like a city's power grid, invisible until someone flipped the wrong switch. I pulled up the architecture diagram, the real one, not the crayon drawing Ty had shown in meetings. 27 microservices dancing in perfect synchronization, authentication layers that validated faster than human thought, the CRM integration that had taken 6 months to perfect because their vendor's documentation was written in what could only be described as aggressive ambiguity. But the masterpiece was the compliance layer, my insurance policy against chaos. See, Prairiegate sold enterprise software to healthcare companies, financial institutions, government contractors. These weren't startups who'd accept move fast and break things. They needed SOC 2 HIPAA compliance, PCI DSS certification. One violation could trigger audits that would eat quarters of runway. Every deal, every trial account, every customer interaction passed through my orchestration framework for compliance validation. It was like having a legal team that worked at the speed of light, checking every move against 1,000 regulations. And it all ran under license from Northwind Ledger LLC. I opened the 2022 renewal agreement, reading Clause 4C for the dozenth time. The language was precise, surgical. The licensed orchestration framework remains the intellectual property of Northwind Ledger LLC. Continuity of service requires active license validation. In the event of termination without standard transition procedures, minimum 90 days notice and formal knowledge transfer, the framework will enter dormant compliance mode. In this state, no new transactions can be initiated until the license holder provides reauthorization. Existing data remains accessible but frozen. This clause cannot be waived without written consent from the license holder. Below it, 3 signatures: Graham Whitford, Ty Whitford, Colin Voss. They'd signed it during the Series B fundraise, when they needed our compliance certifications to close a $40 million round. I'd saved them 3 months of audit prep. They'd been grateful then. Called me a rock star, a ninja. All those words that meant essential until they didn't. I navigated to my vendor portal, the control center they'd forgotten existed. It ran on separate infrastructure, my infrastructure, paid for by Northwind Ledger LLC. The interface was clean, minimal, no sage green or revolutionary UX, just 6 toggle switches that controlled 6 critical scopes in their system. Each scope governed a specific capability: deal create, the ability to enter new opportunities into the CRM; trial provision, spinning up trial accounts for prospects; quote sign generating and executing sales contracts; billing authorize, processing payment authorizations; sandbox seed, creating demo environments for sales engineers; SLA start, initiating service level agreements for new customers. Together, these 6 scopes were the respiratory system of their sales machine. Without them, PrairieGate could still run existing customers, support current operations, access all their data, but they couldn't sell anything new, couldn't onboard anyone, couldn't grow. The pipeline would freeze at exactly its current state. I checked the system health dashboard. Everything hummed perfectly. The investor showcase was scheduled for Thursday, 5 days away. They'd be demonstrating their revolutionary platform to 3 venture capital firms, all while projecting next quarter's revenue based on a pipeline they assumed would always flow. My phone buzzed. An email from HR, sent at 11 p.m., Saturday night, scheduled to arrive Sunday morning. Transition planning meeting request. The subject line might as well have read, "Your execution date." I opened my development environment one more time, not to sabotage, but to document every function, every dependency, every critical path. I mapped it all to a private repository, not out of spite, but out of professionalism. When this was over, when they came asking questions, I'd have answers. Clean, clear, indisputable answers. But first, I had one small pull request to submit. The code was elegant 12 lines that added a license validation check to the orchestration layer's initialization sequence. If the Northwind Ledger license wasn't valid, the system would honor Clause 4C exactly as written. No destruction, no data loss, just a pause like a heart stopping between beats, waiting for permission to continue. I labeled the PR Routine Compliance Validation Update and assigned it to the junior developer who always reviewed my code without reading it, too intimidated to question 6 years of seniority. The approval came in 40 minutes. LGTM deployed to production. I smiled at the rocket emoji. How perfectly Ty. The trap wasn't the code. The trap was the contract they'd signed, the words they'd ignored, the overhead they'd dismissed as forms and checkboxes. I hadn't hidden anything. Every piece was in plain sight, documented, legally bulletproof. I stood, stretched, made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in months. Eggs over easy, sourdough toast, coffee that didn't taste like corporate desperation. Outside, Oakmere was waking up to another Sunday of disruption and innovation. Tomorrow, they'd call me into their transition meeting. They'd explain strategic realignment with practice sympathy. They'd offer a severance package designed to buy silence. And I'd sign everything they put in front of me. Because they'd already signed the only document that mattered, and they didn't even remember doing it. Monday arrived dressed in corporate empathy. The meeting invite had updated overnight, alignment and transition discussion in Conference Room B, the one they used for terminations because it had no windows, 10 a.m., sharp, with HR Director Janet Mills and Colin Voss attending. Graham and Ty would be, unfortunately, unavailable, too important to handle their own executions. I dressed carefully, Not the usual developer uniform of jeans and a Prairie Gate hoodie, but the charcoal suit I'd worn to my first day 6 years ago. If they wanted professional, I'd give them professional. Janet had arranged the room like a funeral parlor, tissues strategically placed, water bottles with the labels facing out, 2 manila folders aligned perfectly parallel. Colin sat checking his phone, avoiding eye contact like guilt was contagious. "Leah, thank you for joining us," Janet began, her voice calibrated to the exact frequency of synthetic concern. "As you know, Prairie Gate is entering an exciting new phase of growth." "Revolutionary," I said. "I heard." She blinked but continued. "With this evolution comes the need to restructure certain positions to better align with our strategic objectives." Colin finally looked up. "Your work here has been valuable, Leah. This isn't about performance. Just about being overhead." Janet shuffled papers. "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 3-month salary, continued health coverage through year-end, and of course, a strong reference letter." She slid the first folder across the table. I opened it, read every line while they fidgeted. Standard separation agreement, non-disparagement clause, waiver of claims, the usual corporate last rites. "I'll need my complete personnel file," I said, "including all contracts and addendums." "Of course," Janet replied, clearly relieved I wasn't crying or threatening litigation. "We can have that prepared by end of day." "I'll wait." Colin's eyebrows rose. "You'll wait?" "For my file, I'll sign everything once I've reviewed my complete documentation. 6 years is a lot of paper." They exchanged glances. Janet forced a smile. "That's certainly reasonable. Would you prefer to wait in your office?" "Here is fine." 2 hours. That's how long it took them to print 6 years of performance reviews. Contracts, addendums, and the document they'd forgotten existed, the Northwind Ledger LLC licensing agreement, buried on page 247 of the stack they wheeled in on a cart. I read every page, occasionally making notes, letting them marinate in their own discomfort. Janet left twice for urgent matters. Colin stayed, scrolling through his phone with increasing agitation as lunch approached and passed. Finally, I signed the separation agreement. Clean signature, no drama. "Your final day will be today," Janet said, visibly relieved. "We'll need your badge, laptop, and any company property." Of course, though technically, the orchestration framework isn't company property. Colin frowned. "What do you mean?" I pulled page 247 from the stack. "The framework is licensed from Northwind Ledger LLC. That's my consulting company. See, your signature is right there." His face went through several expressions before settling on forced calm. I'm sure legal reviewed this." "I'm sure they did. Clause 4C is particularly thorough." I handed over my badge and laptop, keeping my voice neutral, professional. "I'll maintain the license as per our agreement, of course, though you should know that termination without the 90-day transition period specified in the clause triggers certain provisions." "Provisions," Janet's voice pitched higher. "Nothing destructive. The framework simply enters dormant compliance mode until the license holder, that's me, reauthorizes operations. It's all there in the documentation you just gave me." Colin was already pulling out his phone, probably texting legal. I stood, gathered my personal items from the box they'd thoughtfully pre-packed from my desk. "Wait," Colin said. "What does dormant compliance mode mean?" "The system maintains existing operations but pauses new transaction authorities. Think of it like a house where the locks still work, but you can't make new keys." "That would affect sales." "It would affect new sales. Yes. Existing customers won't notice anything." Janet looked between us. "This sounds like, are you threatening us?" "I'm honoring a legal contract you signed, the one that classifies me as overhead." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Oh, one more thing. I submitted a routine update to the orchestration layer yesterday. Just a validation check to ensure license compliance. It's already in production." Colin stood. "Leah, let's discuss this." "We just did," You have my personal email if legal needs clarification on Clause 4C. The security guard was waiting to escort me out standard procedure. Though he looked apologetic, I'd debugged his son's gaming PC last year. We walked in silence through the open office where developers avoided eye contact and managers pretended to be busy. Ty stood by the exit, hands in his hoodie pockets, smirking. No hard feelings, right? It's just business. Just business, I agreed. You should think about this as an opportunity. Time to evolve. Maybe learn some newer technologies. I stopped, looked at him directly. Ty, do you know what a dead man's switch is? His smirk faltered. What? It's a mechanism that activates when the operator becomes incapacitated. Trains have them. Nuclear facilities have them. I smiled. Orchestration frameworks have them. Are you threatening? I'm explaining engineering, since you're so interested in newer technologies. The security guard touched my elbow gently. Time to go. I walked out of Prairie Gate Systems at 2:17 p.m. on Monday, October 14th. The parking lot was full of Teslas and BMWs and one wrapped Lamborghini that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. My old Honda started on the first try, reliable as compiled code. The drive home took 12 minutes. I didn't play music, didn't check my phone at red lights, just drove and breathed and thought about dormant compliance mode, about systems waiting for permission to continue. At home, I poured a glass of wine, the good stuff, not the conference room swill, and opened my laptop to the vendor portal. 6 green lights still glowing. Deal create, trial provision, quote sign, billing authorize, sandbox seed, SLA start. All waiting for my decision. The investor showcase was Thursday, 72 hours for them to realize what they'd signed, what they'd dismissed, what they'd classified as overhead. I closed the laptop and raised my glass to the empty room. To evolution, I said, and smiled. Tuesday morning. The cracks started showing. Marcus texted me at 7:12 a.m. Systems acting weird, not broken, just sluggish, like it's thinking too hard. I didn't respond. I was officially unemployed, drinking coffee on my balcony, watching Oakmere's tech district wake up to another day of disruption. By 9 a.m., the Prairie Gate Slack was apparently on fire. Marcus kept me updated with screenshots, each one more frantic than the last. Token refresh taking 47 seconds instead of 2. Anyone else seeing this? CRM is lagging. Deals taking forever to update. Why does creating a trial account feel like dial-up internet? Provisioning is at 94 seconds. The beauty was that nothing was actually broken. Every transaction completed eventually. Every token validated. Every API responded. The system was just contemplating. Like a worker who'd been told they were overhead suddenly working exactly to specification. No faster. Ty's messages started appearing in the screenshots, each one a masterpiece of manufactured authority. Team, we're experiencing minor optimization issues. Push through. This is why we need to modernize our stack. Legacy code showing its age. Engineering, I need solutions, not problems. Think revolutionary. By noon, someone had created a Slack channel called Had the Slowening. Within an hour, it had 200 members sharing increasingly creative descriptions of the system's behavior. It's like the code has seasonal depression. Feels like the servers are reading terms and conditions. Did someone replace our RAM with philosophy majors? The junior developers were panicking, the senior developers were suspicious, and somewhere in his corner office, Ty was probably explaining to his father how this was all part of the revolutionary process. Colin's email landed at 2:43 p.m., sent to the entire engineering team, CC'd to legal. Team, we're investigating unusual latency in our orchestration layer. Initial analysis suggests possible licensing validation issues. Please prioritize this investigation. Any developer with knowledge of the Northwind Ledger Framework should respond immediately. The Northwind Ledger Framework. At least someone had been reading. Marcus called me directly at 3 p.m. Leah, what did you do? I got classified as overhead and escorted from the building. No, I mean, is this you, the slowdown? The system is operating within contractual parameters. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. He was quiet for a moment. They're losing their minds here. Ty just called an emergency all hands for tomorrow. The investor showcase is Thursday, and they can't demo a system that moves like molasses. It doesn't move like molasses. It moves like a system validating license compliance. Every single transaction. That's, he paused, probably doing the math. That's brilliant and completely legal. I learned from the best. Remember when Graham made us implement that authentication layer that checked permissions 17 times? He called it comprehensive security. Marcus laughed. This is better. This is art. Wednesday's all hands was scheduled for 10 a.m. by 9:55. According to Marcus, the main conference room was packed. Graham had even flown back from his strategic planning retreat in Tahoe. Marcus live-streamed it for me through his phone, hidden behind his laptop screen. Graham stood at the front, his usual CEO costume replaced with what he probably thought looked hands-on jeans and a button-down with rolled sleeves. Ty flanked him, wearing a hoodie that said, "Disrupt Everything," which seemed ironically appropriate. "Team," Graham began, "we're experiencing what I call a growth opportunity." Someone in the back actually snorted. "Our systems are showing us where we need to evolve. This isn't a setback, it's a springboard." Ty took over, pulling up a slide that looked like he'd made it at 9:54. "The orchestration layer is running redundant compliance checks. We're going to optimize by removing these bottlenecks." A senior developer raised her hand. "The compliance checks are contractually required. We can't just remove them." "We'll refactor," Ty said, as if the word was magic. "The framework is licensed," she continued. "From Northwind Ledger LLC, we can't modify it without violating the license agreement." The room went quiet. Graham's jaw muscles flexed. Colin stood up from the corner where he'd been hiding. "We're in communication with the license holder. This will be resolved before tomorrow's showcase." "Who's the license holder?" someone asked. The silence stretched like a loading bar at 99%. "Former employee," Colin finally said. "We're handling it." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Developers arguing about solutions, managers demanding timelines, and somewhere in the noise, Ty repeating revolutionary like a mantra that had lost its power. My phone rang at 4:15 p.m. "Colin?" "Leah." "Colin, we need to discuss the framework situation." "There's no situation. The framework is operating exactly as designed." "You know what I mean. I know you have an investor showcase tomorrow. I know you need to demonstrate a functional sales pipeline. And I know you signed a contract that specifies the terms for continuity of service. What do you want?" "Nothing. I already got what I wanted classified as overhead and terminated without proper transition. The system is simply responding accordingly." "This is extortion. This is contract law. You should have legal explain the difference." He breathed heavily through his nose. "The investors will see exactly what you've built. A system so dependent on overhead that removing it causes everything to slow to unusable speeds." "Leah, please. Check your email. Colin, I've sent a formal notice regarding Clause 4C activation. The framework is in dormant compliance mode pending license holder review. The review period, as specified in the contract you signed, is 30 business days." 30 days. Business days, so about 6 weeks. "The showcase is tomorrow. Then you should probably update your slides." I hung up and made myself dinner proper pasta. Not the microwave meals that had sustained me through 6 years of late-night debugging. Outside, the October sun set over Oakmere's glass towers, painting them gold and rust. My laptop sat closed on the coffee table. The vendor portal waiting behind its black screen. 6 green lights that could stay green or turn red with 6 simple clicks. Tomorrow, they'd stand before investors and try to explain why their revolutionary platform moved like it was powered by a hand crank. They'd use words like optimization phase, and strategic refinement. But the investors would see the truth, a company that had classified its foundation as overhead, then wondered why the house wouldn't stop swaying. Thursday, Investor Showcase Day, 3:55 p.m. I sat in my home office, laptop open, vendor portal glowing. Marcus had gone silent an hour ago, probably forced into the showcase room for all-hands-on-deck damage control. But I didn't need updates. I knew exactly what was happening at Prairie Gate because I could see it in my system logs. Token refresh requests climbing, validation attempts exponential, timeout errors cascading. They were trying to brute force through the slowdown, hammering the system with parallel requests, thinking volume could overcome validation, like trying to drain a pool through a straw by sucking harder. 4 p.m. exactly. Showcase start time. I opened the vendor portal's control panel. 6 green status lights stared back at me, each one a pillar holding up their entire sales infrastructure. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. They'd called me overhead. Extra. A long face dragging down their energy. I clicked the first toggle. Deal create disabled. The effect was instant. My monitoring dashboard lit up like Christmas error messages flooding in from their CRM as every attempt to create a new opportunity hit a wall. Not an error, exactly. Just a polite message. License validation failed. Scope deal create. Contact license administrator. I clicked the second toggle. Trial provision disabled. Their demo environment flatlined. No new trials could spin up. The sales engineers probably had backup sandboxes ready, but those would expire in hours without the ability to provision fresh ones. Third toggle. Quote sign disabled. The contract generation system went dark. Any deal they might somehow salvage couldn't move to signing. The DocuSign integration would just spin, waiting for authorization that would never come. Fourth toggle. Billing authorized disabled. Even if they managed to paper a deal manually, they couldn't process payment authorizations. The entire revenue recognition flow stopped cold. Fifth toggle. Sandbox seed disabled. Their pre-built demo environments started failing to refresh. Whatever they were showing the investors was now running on borrowed time. Sixth toggle. SLA start disabled. The final nail. Even existing customers couldn't modify their service agreements. No upgrades, no expansions, no upsells. I leaned back and watched the cascade in real time. The CRM dashboard I still had access to, they'd forgotten to revoke my read-only analyst credentials, showed the transformation like a time-lapse of death. Pipeline value at 4 p.m. 128,743 291. Pipeline value at 128,743 291. Pipeline value at 274 hours, 328, 455. The numbers tumbled as deals automatically reclassified. The CRM's logic was beautiful in its simplicity. If a deal couldn't progress, it wasn't qualified. If it wasn't qualified, it wasn't pipeline. 40331 on, 492 out, 338. 4048 on, 7th and 5, 903, 405 2000, 341, 785, 406 000. Not deleted, not destroyed, just unqualified. Every opportunity sitting in a perfect quantum state of could be valuable if only the system would let us process it. My phone exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from Colin, 23 from a number I didn't recognize, probably legal, 41 text messages that I didn't bother reading. Then, at 4:22 p.m., a call from Ty. I answered on the third ring. What did you do? He wasn't using his revolutionary voice anymore. I exercised my rights as license holder. The investors are in the room. The demo is failing. Everything is frozen. Not frozen, dormant. There's a legal distinction. I don't care about distinctions. Turn it back on. I'm reviewing the situation, as specified in Clause 4C. The review period is 30 business days. We'll sue you into oblivion. For following a contract you signed, good luck with that. I heard Graham's voice in the background, sharp and panicked. Then muffled conversation, probably a hand over the phone. Ty came back. What do you want? Money, your job back, and name it. I wanted to not be classified as overhead. That ship has sailed. This is insane. You're destroying the company over a word. I'm not destroying anything. I'm withholding a license for software you decided wasn't important enough to keep in-house. Every system is still running. You just can't sell anything new. The investors are seeing exactly what you built, a company so dependent on what you called forms and checkboxes that without them, you have no business model. More muffled conversation. Then Graham's voice, forced calm but cracking at the edges. Ms. Archer, Leah, this is Graham. Let's discuss this professionally. We did that Monday. You sent HR and Colin instead of attending yourself. That was a mistake. I see that now. Do you just see your valuation evaporating? Both, he admitted, which was probably the first honest thing he'd said in months. What will it take to restore service? Check your email. I've sent terms for a new licensing agreement. We're in the middle of a showcase. Then you should probably check quickly. I hung up and pulled up the email I'd drafted but hadn't sent. One click, and it landed in Graham's inbox. The terms were simple. Immediate payment of the standard 90-day transition fee specified in the original contract. Public acknowledgement of Northwind Ledger LLC's critical contribution to Prairie Gate's infrastructure. My consulting rate for the 30-day review period, $2,500 per hour, retroactive to Monday. A new licensing agreement at 3x the previous rate, given the proven critical nature of the framework. At 4:38 p.m., my monitoring dashboard showed something interesting. Someone was trying to bypass the framework entirely, probably their revolutionary attempt to hot patch the system. The attempts failed instantly. The orchestration layer was too deeply integrated. Its tentacles wrapped around every service, every API, every function that mattered. You can't remove the foundation while standing on the house. At 4:45, Colin called. We accept your terms. All of them. All of them. I'll need it in writing, signed by Graham, Ty, and yourself. You'll have it in 10 minutes. Then you'll have restored service in 11. The DocuSign notification arrived at 4:54. I read every word, confirmed every detail. Their signatures looked shaky, like they'd signed while standing in front of very unhappy investors. I returned to the vendor portal. 6 red lights glared at me like accusations. But a deal was a deal. One by one, I toggled them back to green. The system awakened instantly. Deals requalifying. Pipeline rebuilding. The CRM dashboard showed the resurrection. Serotonin to 18,445, 231 to 67. 890, 443 to 94,336, 878 to 121, 450, 920. By 5:02, it stabilized at 126 hours, 891, 357. Not quite the full 128 million some deals had genuinely expired during the outage, but close enough to save face, maybe. My phone buzzed with a bank notification. The transition fee had already hit my account. I closed my laptop and poured myself a proper drink. Outside, the October evening painted Oakmere in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere across town, they were probably spinning the outage as a live demonstration of our robust failure recovery systems. But everyone in that room knew the truth. They'd seen what overhead really meant. They'd watched $128 million vanish with 6 clicks from someone they'd dismissed as extra. The revolution had been televised, just not the one they'd planned. 5:15 p.m., the war room at Prairie Gate had become a crime scene investigation. Marcus sent me photos from inside whiteboards, covered in frantic diagrams. Legal huddled over printed contracts with highlighters like crime scene tape. Graham standing at the center looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. The investors hadn't left. They demanded answers. Who owns this Northwind Ledger? One of them had asked. According to Marcus's covert recording, a former employee, Graham had replied, that you just fired. We restructured. You fired the person who owns your entire sales infrastructure. The silence in the recording was beautiful. Colin had tried to explain the framework was developed during employment. Under a licensing agreement, the investor interrupted, which I'm reading right now, signed by all three of you, this Clause 4C is bulletproof. Your entire pipeline depends on a vendor you just terminated. Ty's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it, we thought it was work for hire. You thought, another investor now. You thought, did anyone read this contract? It was 2022, Graham said weakly. We were moving fast, trying to close the Series B. So you signed away control of your critical infrastructure to save time. Legal had found the smoking gun at 547, the email thread from 2022, where I'd explicitly explained the licensing structure, where Graham had replied, whatever gets us to market faster, where Ty had added a thumbs-up emoji, where Colin had written, approved for expedited processing. The head of legal, Diana Chen, someone I'd never met, but who was apparently very good at her job, laid it out with surgical precision. The framework is legitimately licensed from Northwind Ledger LLC. Ms. Archer developed the initial version before joining PrairieGate, then enhanced it during employment under a clear licensing agreement. We approved this structure. We signed it. We've been paying licensing fees for 2 years. There's no legal recourse here. Can we build around it? Graham asked. The CTO, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. The orchestration layer touches everything, every API, every service, every customer interaction. It would take 18 months minimum to extract it, and we'd have to rebuild from scratch. We'd also lose all our compliance certifications. 18 months. Ty's revolutionary confidence had completely evaporated. If we're lucky, and that's assuming we can find engineers who understand it well enough to replace it, the documentation alone references 43,000 integration points. Diana pulled up another document on the conference room screen, my new licensing agreement. She's not even being unreasonable, Diana said. The new rate is high but not extortionate given the proven critical nature of the system. The transition fee is exactly what was specified in the original contract. The consulting rate for the review period is market standard for emergency enterprise recovery. She planned this, Graham said. No, Diana corrected. She protected herself. You gave her the weapon when you signed this contract. She only used it when you fired her. At 6:12 p.m., the investor delegation made their decision. Marcus caught it on video, 3 venture capitalists in identical navy blazers standing like a tribunal. We're postponing our investment decision pending a full technical and legal audit, the lead investor announced. This level of operational risk is unacceptable. A single point of failure controlled by an external entity, an entity you just antagonized, is exactly the kind of governance failure that destroys companies. We can explain. Graham started. You can explain to your board. We'll be recommending they review leadership decisions that led to this exposure. They left at 6:25. The room stayed frozen for a full minute after the door closed. Then Colin said what everyone was thinking, we need her back. She won't come back, Ty muttered. Not after you called her overhead, Marcus said, finally speaking up. After you said she was extra, after you planned her termination at your little lakeside retreat. All eyes turned to Marcus. Yeah, she knows about that too. You think people don't talk? You think we didn't notice you measuring her for a coffin while she kept your precious pipeline flowing? Graham's face went red. That's enough. Is it because from where I'm sitting, you just learned what overhead actually means? It means the stuff you don't notice until it's gone. The foundation you stand on while giving speeches about revolution. My phone buzzed. A text from Diana Chen. Ms. Archer, I'm the head of legal at PrairieGate. I wanted to personally apologize for this situation. Your contract work was exemplary, and you've acted entirely within your rights. If you ever need a legal reference or recommendation, please don't hesitate to reach out. Professional respect from the one person there who understood what had really happened. At 6:45, the countdown timer appeared on every screen in the building. Not my doing that was built into the framework's compliance module, a feature they'd requested to track SLA adherence, but now it showed something different. License review period 29 days, 17 hours, 15 minutes remaining. A reminder that their entire business model existed at my discretion for the next month. Marcus called me at 7 p.m. You should see Ty's face. He's just staring at the countdown like it's the doomsday clock. How's Graham? Board called an emergency meeting. He's been in his office on the phone for an hour. Colin's already updating his LinkedIn. And the team? Half of them are applauding you. The other half are terrified they're next. They won't be. I made sure the new agreement protects the engineering team. Check Section 7. Marcus went quiet, probably reading. You required them to maintain current staffing levels for the license to remain valid. Overhead protection. If they want to keep the lights on, they need to keep the people who actually know where the switches are. That's professional. I'm not trying to burn the place down. Marcus, I'm just ensuring proper valuation of critical infrastructure. At 7:30, my bank app showed another notification. The consulting fees for the first 4 days, paid in full, $2,500 per hour, 24 hours a day, retroactive to Monday. They were billing me as 24-hour support because the license review was technically ongoing even while I slept. $240,000 for 4 days of not destroying their company. The revolution had been expensive, just not in the way they'd planned. 8:30 p.m., Thursday evening, my phone rang with a number I hadn't saved but recognized Ty's personal cell. Leah. His voice had lost all its revolutionary polish. Ty, I need to ask you something. Ask. Did you know? When you submitted that code update Sunday, did you know we were going to fire you? I knew you thought I was overhead. A long pause. I was wrong. Yes. That's it, yes. What do you want me to say? Ty. That it's okay. That calling someone extra while they hold your entire business together is just corporate growing pains. I want to fix this. You did? You signed the new agreement? That's not fixing. That's hemorrhaging money to keep the lights on. Then build your own framework. You've got 18 months. You know we can't. Continuity requires respect. I cut him off. That's not just about the code. Ty, it's about understanding what actually makes your company run, not the slides, not the hoodies, not the revolutionary speeches, the boring stuff, the forms and checkboxes, the people you call overhead. I'm sorry. No, you're scared. There's a difference. Both. I'm both. For the first time since Monday, I felt something other than cold satisfaction. Not sympathy exactly, but maybe recognition. We'd all been 29 once, thinking we knew how the world worked. Ty, let me explain something. Every system has hidden dependencies. The things nobody thinks about until they break. I'm not punishing you. I'm teaching you. That countdown timer isn't revenge, it's reality. Every second it ticks is a second you could have avoided by reading what you signed. The investors pulled out. They'll be back. Once you prove you understand operational risk, once you show you've learned to value infrastructure over innovation theater, will you come back? No. Even if we... No. Some bridges can't be unburned. But I'll honor the agreement. You'll get your 30-day review. And if you meet the terms, the license continues. I'm not interested in destroying Prairie Gate. I built too much of it. Then why? Because somewhere out there is another Leah, in another company, being told they're overhead by someone who can't read their own contracts. Maybe this story helps them realize their worth before the door hits them on the way out. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. The board wants Graham gone, he finally said. And you'll take over. They want someone who understands the technology. Do you understand it? I'm learning. Diana's making me read every contract, every technical document, every line of code documentation. She says I need to know what I'm actually running. Smart woman. She also says you're the smartest engineer we've ever had and the dumbest executives we've ever been. She's right on both counts. Leah, thank you. For what? For only taking 6 clicks. You could have destroyed us, deleted everything, corrupted the data. Instead, you just paused us. I'm an engineer, Ty. I build things. Even my revenge is constructive. I hung up and walked to my window. The city sparkled below. Thousands of office windows still lit with other people fighting other battles over other code bases. Somewhere in those towers, other executives were probably calling other engineers overhead right now. My laptop sat closed on the coffee table. The vendor portal would run for 30 days, charging them $2,500 an hour for the privilege of my not destroying what I'd built. After that, they'd pay triple the original licensing rate, every month, indefinitely. The agreement Diana had called reasonable would net me more than my salary ever had. But the money wasn't the point. Neither was the revenge, not really. The point was the lesson, the understanding that some things can't be disrupted, revolutionized, or optimized away. Some things just need to work, quietly, consistently, invisibly. The people who make those things work aren't overhead. They're the foundation. My phone buzzed one last time. Marcus, with a photo from the office. Someone had taped a sign to the countdown monitor. Respect the stack. And below it, in smaller letters, overhead is what keeps you from falling. I smiled, closed my phone, and went to pack a bag. 30 days was a long time to review a license. Might as well do it from somewhere with a beach. The train to the coast left at 11 p.m. I bought a business class ticket. I could afford it now. As the city lights faded behind me, I pulled out a notebook and wrote one line. They called me extra. I zeroed their pipeline in 6 clicks. Sometimes the best code is the code you don't have to write. Sometimes the best revenge is just showing people exactly what they signed up for. The train rolled on through the darkness. Behind me, a timer counted down. Ahead, the ocean waited. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm of the rails carry me forward. No looking back. No regrets. Just clean, documented, properly licensed satisfaction. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma and the true value of overhead, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever been undervalued at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.